Hi everyone and welcome back. So in this video we are going to talk about how we can manage the different environments in the NestJS application. So an application can be deployed to simple local testing and can be deployed to dev, staging, production. How we can feed these runtime variables so that for dev it should connect to dev database, for production it should connect to the production database. So this is a simple structure. And what in any typical application we do is we create a .env file, either it's a Next.js or NestJS or Node.js, Express or SvelteKit, any application. This is like a standard for JavaScript application. We create .env, .env.development, .env.local, and we try to push those key value pair in the process.env. That is the task 1. And task 2 is the whatever the application you are writing, let's say Node.js Express. Then accessing those variables using process.env.port, process.env.database URL. So that's a two-step process. First, populate these variables, key value pair from .env to process.env, and then using those variables in your application code. So let's talk about this in the context of the NestJS, how we can create a .env file and how we can push those environment variables in the NestJS runtime. So for NestJS, we have this NestJS config module. I mean, you can also use a .env module. .env module is also doing the same thing. It reads the .env file and put all those key value pair in the process.env. And then you just need to access those values using process.env.aws secret key, process.env.port, all those things. So how NestJS config works? I think you just need to install it, and then in the root module you can just do config module.for root, and NestJS config module also uses the same .env module internally. Okay, it needs a 4.0 and later, 4.1 and later. That is a TypeScript version. And how do we use it? Using config module.for root. That's very simple. In your root module, you can just add a config module.for root. Config module is coming from NestJS config. So let's add it. Here I can do config module.for root. For that I need to add a dependency, NestJS config, and this is how you can just get started with the config module. So now config module is added. You will just create a .env file that should be created inside a root folder. Okay, and here I put a key value pair, database user, database password, host, port. I mean, you can put any type of key value pair. Even you can also have a env local, env.development, staging and production. And so here I can specify if you want to pass any additional file. So by default it will look for .env file. That is a thumb rule. But let's say, okay, I don't like .env file, I want to use something else. .development.env, .env.local, .env.production. It can be just a file. Here we are not segregating the environment. First of all, it's just a file which you can just change a different name and just specify it. If you are using a different file name, specify in env file path name. Okay, once you do it, then inside any of your service, inside a module, you can start accessing the variables. Another important thing is declaring the config module global. So when you declare it as a global, you don't need to put this config module anywhere in the application. You put it globally in the root module, and then anywhere you can access the config service, or you can start getting the environment variable. This is, let's say we try to implement it. What we are doing is we can have multiple configurations. Okay, configuration for Kafka, configuration for AWS S3, configuration for RabbitMQ, like similar kind of these files. And how you can load these configurations? Inside a config module.for root, you have a load property, and inside you can pass the configuration, which is nothing but an object of key value pair. So here in source folder, how we manage the configurations, I will create a config folder, and inside that you can create all the required files, config.ts, config.interface, all the types and all. So this configuration is a default. Let's say it can be app config, database config, Kafka config. So we can create a multiple configuration files that will have a same structure. It's a default function which is returning an object. So here we have 3 different files: app, database and Kafka. And they have the same set of things. Database has a env port, This is the Kafka database. Can be let's say change it to Kafka and then host and port. Instead of that, it's a Kafka broker and Kafka topic. It can be any type of key value pair we are adding. Okay, this is Kafka topic is of type string. So we have added this. These are the 3 different files, and this is how we will load them. dbconfig, app config, Kafka config, and in config module.for root, you can pass all these inside an array, all the configurations. And now important thing is, first of all, it is global. Now, how can I use this config service in any of my application, in any of my service, controller, helpers, and anything? So you can inject the config service. Private read-only config service is of type config service, and then you can just do this .config service.get. Because this config service we haven't written by ourselves, so we need to find a way how we can access the environment variables anywhere in the method or utility helpers. So I will be just doing a config service, this .config service.get, and you need to pass the key. So .get and the key name. Key name is, let's say, database.host. Inside database object there is a host. So I'm just putting database.host. You can also print the whole database object which contains the host and port, right? So here I will just do the same thing, database.host and database.port. So let's try to print it and try to see what outcome it is going to give. Because it's already running, we can just print the values what it is printing, and you can see it is getting those values first of all from the env. So how it is working? First it got the values from the env to process.env, and then everything is being extracted using config service. So all those things, either you use a .env module or use NestJS config. So just configure the NestJS config. That will help you to populate those key value pair in the process.env. And in the code also, you don't need to write process.env.host. You can use the config service from the NestJS, this .config service.get, and pass the key which you have defined in the configuration. And this is how plain and simple you can manage the configurations in the NestJS. And the configurations can be as complex as you want. In the documentation, there is another thing. You can also validate the configuration. Ki port should be number, Kafka topic should be of string, and they must be provided before you start the application. क्या होता है? You start the application और Kafka topic का नाम नहीं है, Kafka broker का नाम नहीं है, और some required credential you are not passing. Application will not bootstrap, application will terminate, error आ जाएगी. So make sure we can also use those validation things. So वो custom validation I think I can cover in the advanced or intermediate topic. अभी I will start talking about the config namespaces. वो actually है क्या? Kafka can be a namespace which has a Kafka host, broker, topics. And you can also add a validation using joy that, okay, topic should be of string, of multiple length, of particular regex pattern. All the validations of Jod and joy you can add. So that kind of configuration also you can add. That is going to help you that your application will bootstrap only when you are passing right set of configuration. Otherwise application will break. That will tell you even before you debug कि भाई कुछ and कुछ missing है. Some environment variables are not provided, and you will get alerted. So that's it, guys. That's all about configuration management in the NestJS. This is for local. Now what happens at the runtime, like when you deploy to dev, production or staging? Configuration to one file ही होगी, env file. What you will do is you will put these variables in the GitLab secret or GitHub action secret. वहाँ से automatically pick करेगा. आपने अगर इसको dev पर deploy किया तो it will pick the dev credentials, dev secret variables. If you are deploying it to the production, so it will pick a production secret variable. So you don't need to manage the different .env file, .env.development, production. वो locally manage करने का जरूरत नहीं है, because you can just have only one .env file. At the runtime, in the CI/CD, you obviously will have, okay, you are deploying it to dev, pick the dev GitLab credential file or dev env file. Right, because these credentials you cannot put in the code first of all, right? So this is how, I mean, in